Thanks to the New York Times' seminal 1619 Project, which traces the consequences of slavery from its inception centuries ago to its modern-day implications for Black Americans, we've seen a growing movement to reframe how American history is taught in public schools. Well, some parents who are opposed to critical race theory as new curriculum aren't too pleased.
Just because I do not want critical race theory taught to my children in school does not mean that I'm a racist, damn it.
Actually, it does. It's just another example of Republicans turning kids into a wedge issue, just like their politically motivated attacks on transgender youth who just want to play sports. Joining me now is Pulitzer Prize winner and creator of the 1619 Project, Nikole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times Magazine, and Charlotte Clymer, transgender activist and former press secretary for the Human Rights Campaign. Two of my favorite follows on Twitter, brought to life. Nikole, I have to go to you first because you have been firing them up, throwing WBD Du Bois down, like firecrackers all over Twitter. I'm going to allow you to respond to Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader, who said 1619 is not an important date in history. Dates like 1776, the Declaration of Independence, 1787, the Constitution, Civil War, that's the sort of things that are important, not that. And he's also said that he's attacking President Biden's anti-racism focus, and he said it's divisive. And he's joining in the protests against teaching systemic racism, saying it would give students a slanted story. Your thoughts?
Well, one, I don't know how you teach about 1865 without acknowledging that 1619 was an important year, being that 1865 occurs because we began slavery in 1619. But also, clearly, slavery, 1619 was an important date for Mitch McConnell's own family because his own family left Virginia, came to Alabama to start cotton forced labor plantations, owned dozens of other human beings, and his own wealth and status was acquired because of the legacy of slavery. So one, we know that when he's saying that, no one can argue that 1619 was not a foundational date in American history. It nearly led to the demise of our entire nation in 1865, but also it was personally important for Mitch McConnell himself. So when you hear people like him saying that teaching the actual facts of American history are divisive, maybe that's because we have a divisive history in this country. So he's not arguing that we shouldn't teach the truth. He's just saying that the truth is too difficult for apparently our nation to bear, and that we're far too fragile to be able to withstand the scrutiny of the truth.
Thank you for because now we understand why he doesn't want it taught, because I don't want you to learn about me, is what he's basically saying. Tom Cotton had the same issue, and it strikes me, Charlotte, Nikole was tweeting earlier today that, Du Bois wrote, and I think this is so brilliant that people should really read more Du Bois, that the facts of American history have in the last half century been falsified because the nation was ashamed, but also that history has one of two purposes, either to inform you and make you know it, and make you understand the past, or to assuage your need to feel heroic. And American history has, up until now, really been taught as a balm to make Americans feel patriotic and feel good about the country, not as a way to inform people. Most Americans don't know very much about American history. It strikes me that the trans kids attacks sort of almost cut against this need for Americans to feel heroic. Trans kids might be, the biggest sort of easy to victimize children. There's not a lot of trans kids. They're easy to victimize. One would think that what we would want for our stories to feel heroic toward them, their children. Why do you think the opposite of that is happening and trans kids have become like the, sort of sexy wedge issue for Republican politicians?
I think you and Nikole said it perfectly. And by the way, Nikole, I love the 1619 Project. I learned so much reading it. Thank you for leading that project. I would encourage everyone to read it. The Republican Party has run out of ideas. They have nothing left. They weren't able to offer solutions to health care for people's economic woes, for our national security. Under Donald Trump's watch, 500,000 people died in 9 months last year. They have no idea. So what are they going to do? They're going to resort to pandering to people's fear and striking hearts in the hearts of people who don't know a lot about marginalized communities. And trans children are so easy for them to attack because most Americans don't know a lot about trans people and trans health care. And so they're bullying young trans kids. And by the way, when they go to attack trans kids online, they're not showing pictures of white trans kids. They're showing pictures of young Black trans women in high school next to young white girls, cis white girls. And we know the message they're trying to send there. They're trying to send the message that this is who your young white daughter is competing against, this person. Your safety or their safety is threatened and their future is threatened by having to compete against them. We know what they're trying to do here.
And I'm glad that you said that, because there is that intersectional argument. Because, Nicole, the thing is that the easiest sort of tick to go to is fear of Black bodies, right? And even, we do all these stories about policing, and you made another really good point that I think the media needs to absorb. This isn't like a political story, right? It's a story about what we're going to call ourselves as a country, and you really can't extricate enslavement from any of it, including policing. So, talk to us a little bit about how can we talk about this in a more holistic way, because even the policing story is so rooted in enslavement that you cannot separate the two. And what Charlotte just said is the Black body is the easy go-to, even when the real issue you want to play around with is trans kids in sports.
Absolutely. I mean, the entire argument of the 1619 Project is that slavery predates almost every other American institution. That means that it is foundational and embedded in our culture. We don't even have to know how we've learned to think about Black people as more criminal, as more scary, or in the case of trans kids, as more muscular, and so will automatically be frightening to these little white girls. We don't even have to know how we learned that. It is embedded in our culture. And I think what is so important is understanding that intersectionality, the term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, which shows what Black people have always known. Marginalized people have to fight for the rights of all marginalized people, because it never stops at just marginalizing one group. All of us suffer when we allow other people to be marginalized. And so, of course, our fates are intertwined. You don't see Republicans who are arguing for, being so concerned about protecting girls' sports, arguing for girls' sports to be funded at the same rate as men's sports, for girls to be treated the same way in men's sports. They only care about these issues if they can use them as a wedge. They're not actually fighting for equality.
Absolutely. And you're right. And the intersectional argument is why, we people of color are all just as mad at Rick Santorum as people who are Indigenous are about what he said about Indigenous people. Iroquois Convention, look it up, Rick Santorum. I have to ask you, and I almost hate to make you have to answer this question, Charlotte. Caitlyn Jenner is a strange figure because she was for Donald Trump, and he was, a directly anti-trans president. And now she is running for governor and is now decided she, too, is against trans girls playing sports. I don't understand
That's
it.
right.
Within the community, what are people saying and thinking about this?
Listen, every marginalized community has members that work against the equality of that community. It's, every community has that. For trans folks, Caitlyn Jenner is the Phyllis Schlafly of the trans community. That's who she is. She has always worked against LGBTQ equality. She has always worked against our interests. And so when we saw her throw trans children under the bus and directly attack trans children in that interview, we were not surprised. This is who she is. And by the way, she's a hypocrite. Just last year, she told trans journalist Dawn Ennis on her podcast that she had no problem with trans kids playing on teams that align with their gender identity. Caitlyn Jenner has played in women's golf tournaments, for God's sake. This is someone who panders. She's a hypocrite, and she is a hateful person who has no problem attacking trans people to build her brand.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.